In the contest for power, few realize that noise is not strength. It is weakness made audible. The ruler who boasts his victories, the minister who drowns counsels with words, and the soldier who roars louder than he strikes all share one common defect: they reveal too much. The wise man, who seeks not applause but dominion, must understand that silence is not absence. It is force withheld, a dagger sheathed, a storm waiting beyond still skies. It is the most subtle and potent weapon in the arsenal of the ambitious. To remain silent when all others speak is to command the air without uttering a word. In silence, there is no error. A man cannot be contradicted if he has not spoken. He cannot be accused of treachery if he has not pledged loyalty. He cannot be betrayed by his own tongue, for it has never wandered. Words are arrows loosed into the air. Once fired, they are no longer yours. But silence, held close like a blade within a cloak, remains always in your control. It does not betray, it waits. A ruler who holds his silence forces others to speak in his place. They speculate, they whisper, they fear. And fear is the shadow of power. It is not the spoken threat that commands men. It is the unspoken one. The silent prince leaves his courtiers to wonder what he desires, to anticipate his will, and in this anticipation, they become his servants more completely than any order could make them. The man who reveals nothing compels others to imagine everything. They will attribute to him wisdom, ruthlessness, piety, or cunning, depending on their fears or hopes. In this way, the silent man rules over the minds of many, while the talkative man struggles to control even himself. One must never confuse silence with weakness. On the contrary, it takes greater strength to restrain a word than to launch it. Most men speak to be heard, to be known, to prove themselves. But the one who does not need to be known has already risen above them. His silence proclaims that he is not ruled by impulse, nor does he crave approval. He is not seduced by the sound of his own voice, nor by the temptation to answer every slight or boast of every triumph. He remains unmoved, and thus he cannot be manipulated. The man who speaks constantly opens 100 doors for his enemies. The man who remains silent keeps all entrances locked. In negotiation, silence creates imbalance. When one party waits patiently, without offering terms or showing eagerness, the other grows uneasy. They begin to fill the silence with concessions, explanations, and mistakes. A single quiet gaze can disarm a man more completely than 1,000 words. And in warfare, as in politics, disarming your opponent before the blow is struck is the highest form of strategy. Those who cannot endure silence are slaves to their own noise, and slaves are easily conquered. Silence also serves in the gathering of information. A ruler who listens, who allows others to speak freely while he merely watches, learns far more than he reveals. He observes loyalties, weaknesses, desires. Men betray themselves with every word they utter. They seek favor, they gossip, they boast, and in doing so, they place their weapons on the table. But the silent man carries his weapons hidden. He is underestimated by the vain and the careless until it is too late. Furthermore, silence protects against the perils of emotion. A word spoken in anger or pride can unravel years of careful preparation. A sovereign who gives voice to his wrath exposes himself, and worse, he creates enemies. Silence, on the other hand, swallows anger like a deep well. It keeps his enemies uncertain. Does he know? Will he act? When? They must wait, and in waiting they weaken. A man who cannot be read is a man who cannot be preempted. He strikes not in fury, but with deliberation, and his strike is all the more feared for its quiet approach. Even in personal matters, silence serves strength. The affections of allies, the ambitions of rivals, the loyalties of lovers, all become clearer when one listens more than he speaks. Those who feel unheard will try harder to be heard. Those who are not contradicted will reveal more than they intended. The silent man becomes a mirror in which others see only themselves, and in doing so, they expose their desires. And once a desire is known, it can be manipulated. To wield silence is not merely to abstain from speech, but to command the space that speech would occupy. It is to bend the attention of others without offering them a single clue. It is to guard one's own mind while opening the minds of others. This is why the true master of power does not shout in the square or posture before the court. He stands aside, he watches, he waits. And in his waiting, he gathers more than those who act rashly ever win. Power is never fully held in the hand. It is held in the minds of those who fear it, seek it, or serve it. The man who is entirely known is already half defeated, for his enemies may measure his strength, his allies may weigh his worth, and his servants may begin to believe they understand him. There is no greater threat to command than predictability. Once a ruler's thoughts are laid bare, his next move can be anticipated, countered, and undone. But the man who wraps himself in mystery is beyond grasp. He becomes a shadow against the wall, perhaps tall, perhaps small, perhaps alone, perhaps armed. But he is never fully seen, and therefore never fully opposed. A leader must learn to conceal more than his weaknesses. Even his strengths, when displayed too openly, invite challenge. The perception of invincibility is far more useful than the proof of it. Let the people believe he has spies in every chamber, ears in every council, hands that reach across the sea, whether or not it is true. Let them imagine that he is capable of acts he has never performed, that he knows secrets he has never learned. The belief that a ruler knows more than he does, sees more than he sees, and plans more than he plans is more powerful than any army at his command. Men are ruled not by facts but by perceptions, and mystery breeds the most potent perception of all fear. To govern through mystery is to become a mirror in which others see their own expectations reflected. They will project onto the silent sovereign whatever traits they most dread or desire. The fearful will imagine him cruel. The hopeful will see him as just. The ambitious will think him a rival, while the loyal will view him as a father. None of these images must be confirmed. All may be encouraged. A look, a pause, a gesture withheld. These carry more weight than proclamations. When nothing is said with certainty, everything is possible. And when everything is possible, all are cautious. Revealing intentions is a luxury reserved for those who have no enemies. The ruler cannot afford such indulgence. Every word he speaks must be calculated, and every silence he keeps must be deeper than a well. There are few things more dangerous than a ruler who speaks openly of his plans, for in doing so, he gives his opponents the gift of preparation. But the ruler whose actions are sudden, whose intentions are never foretold, causes uncertainty to bloom in the hearts of rivals. Uncertainty delays action. Delayed action creates openings. Openings become victories. A prince may wear fine garments, build tall monuments, or sit upon a golden throne, but none of these inspire the same obedience as a hidden mind. The more a ruler is seen, the more he becomes a man among men. The more he is felt but not grasped, the more he becomes something greater, an idea. And ideas cannot be assassinated, dethroned, or betrayed. The mysterious ruler becomes myth, and myths are obeyed even in absence. This concealment must extend beyond words. The ruler's expressions, his gestures, even the rhythm of his steps must be considered. A momentary glance may reveal preference. A delayed answer may hint at indecision. The art of control lies in the discipline to remain unreadable. A mask must be worn not just in ceremony, but in daily dealings. His ministers may flatter him, his generals may boast before him, but he must never let his favor or disapproval be too plain. To one he may smile without meaning, to another remain impassive despite rage. Let his true thoughts be known only to himself, or not even fully there. For a ruler who fully knows himself is a man at rest, and a man at rest becomes a man at risk. There is strength in what is unseen. A general who hides his troops may rout a larger force. A state that keeps its weapons veiled may avoid war entirely. Likewise, a ruler who guards his heart, who speaks less than he thinks and acts more than he announces, becomes immune to many of the diseases of rule. Flattery cannot ensnare him if he listens but never confirms. Treason cannot sprout in soil where trust is never sown without test. The ruler's mind must be a fortress, without doors or windows, save for those he opens by will. When mystery surrounds power, it exaggerates it. A small gesture becomes a great signal. A single word becomes a policy. Silence becomes a warning. The ruler need not shout commands if men have learned to listen closely to his silence. In a court full of voices, the quiet man is most feared, for no one knows whether his silence is approval, judgment, or the calm before retribution. and so they behave. They hesitate. They obey. To wield mystery is not to deceive for its own sake, but to bind the world with invisible chains. It is to speak only when necessary, and then not completely. It is to know that men fear the unknown more than they resist the known. A king who is not fully seen cannot be cornered. A ruler who is not fully known cannot be destroyed. His mystery becomes armor. His silence becomes law. His hidden nature becomes his throne. A man reveals his character not in silence but in speech. When his mouth opens, so does the window to his ambitions, his weaknesses, and his fears. Those who govern wisely speak with purpose and precision, for every word has weight, and every utterance carries the scent of their design. The one who speaks too often lays his mind bare like an unguarded field, trampled by the feet of spies, flatterers, and foes alike. But the man who speaks little conceals more than his voice. He conceals his power, and in that concealment, he multiplies it. The wise ruler understands that words once spoken cannot be recalled. They echo through courts and corridors, twisted by interpretation, carried by rumor, sharpened into weapons by those who seek to undermine him. A speech may ignite loyalty, but it may also incite rebellion. A promise may rally allies, but it also creates a debt. To speak is to act, and every act invites judgment. Thus, the prudent man speaks not to express, but to achieve. He does not seek admiration in eloquence, but authority in restraint. To observe is to rule unseen. In silence, one becomes the eye and the ear, the shadow in the room that all must heed, but none can accuse. The sovereign who watches more than he speaks learns the true structure of his court. He discerns who flatters and who resents, who leads and who obeys, who thinks themselves indispensable and who works silently in loyalty. He becomes familiar with the desires that drive men and the fears that bind them. And with this knowledge, he begins to direct them, not through orders, but through influence, pressure, and the subtle manipulation of choice. In every conversation, there are those who listen and those who reveal. It is better to be the former. The one who listens gains insight. The one who speaks gives it away. A man eager to tell his own story has already abandoned control of the tale. He can be led, questioned, baited. But the man who listens, truly listens, holds the reins. He need not respond to every claim, nor correct every falsehood. He allows others to dig their own graves with their own tongues, and when the time is right, he closes the soil over them without a word. The courtier who speaks first may appear bold, but he is also the one who exposes himself. In councils and negotiations, the first voice reveals the shape of his thinking. He offers his strategy, his valuation, even his insecurities in what he believes is reason. But the ruler who lets others speak first, who waits and measures before responding, turns their words into a map. Their arguments become signposts. Their tones reveal urgency or confidence. He sees where they are strong and where they are afraid. He watches their eyes, their hands, their posture. These betray far more than their carefully chosen phrases. By observing more and saying less, he becomes a collector of secrets. A ruler must understand that silence does not mean absence. It means presence in its most potent form. It is attention, it is judgment held back. It is power suspended like a sword above the table. In a room where all others argue, the one who remains quiet holds dominance, for his silence forces others to wonder. Do they displease him? Does he agree? Is he waiting for more? That doubt is more effective than any spoken threat. Speech must be used sparingly, like gold inlay on armor, rare, deliberate, and dazzling only in its restraint. When a man who rarely speaks chooses to do so, his words crash like thunder. Their scarcity gives them weight. His court will lean forward to hear. His enemies will hold their breath. His allies will look for meaning in every syllable. This is the speech that commands, because it is unexpected. The man who speaks always, whose voice becomes familiar, loses this power. He becomes background noise in his own kingdom. A ruler must be feared for his silence as much as his sword. He must train himself to endure the need to explain, to defend, to retaliate with words. Each of these urges is a weakness. The truly powerful do not answer every insult. They do not declare their every ambition. They move unseen, speak only to shape outcomes, and remain silent when silence serves them better. They do not feed the public's hunger for noise is the domain of the rabble and the weak. The people may chatter like birds in spring, but the falcon remains still until the strike. Even among allies, one must be cautious. Friends today are often enemies tomorrow, and the words spoken in trust today may be the dagger that finds your back when fortunes shift. The ruler who has spoken little leaves little to be turned against him. His record is clean not because he has done no wrong, but because he has said nothing to prove it. To speak little is not to lack opinion. It is to know that opinion is best expressed in action. The wise do not boast their plans, they enact them. They do not proclaim loyalty, they demonstrate it. They do not need to speak to lead, their silence makes others follow. For it is not the loudest voice that commands the room. It is the one who, having said nothing, still makes others pause before they speak. In the theater of power, it is not always the sword that determines the victor, nor the proclamation that establishes dominion, but the pause between actions, the silence that unsettles, that provokes thought, fear, and misjudgment. Silence, when deployed with intent, is not mere inaction. It is a calculated stroke of statecraft. It is a move in the game where others rush forward and lose their footing, while the silent player watches, waits, and strikes when the board has shifted irreversibly in his favor. To understand silence as a strategy is to possess one of the most elegant weapons in the arsenal of control. Words and noise are the tools of the impatient. The clamor of many voices is a mark of disunity and insecurity. In council chambers, the man who demands attention by volume rather than reason is often the one who fears he will not be heeded otherwise. A true strategist understands that by speaking, one exposes not only thoughts but intentions, hopes, and fears. Every uttered word becomes a path that others may follow, intercept, or obstruct. The ruler who commits himself too early through speech ties his own hands. But the one who withholds, who observes and speaks only when the moment has ripened, carves the path others must walk. A well-timed silence breaks more confidence than a loud rebuke. In diplomacy, it introduces doubt into the minds of adversaries. In council, it challenges ministers to question their own reasoning. In confrontation, it deflects provocation and forces the aggressor into uncertainty. An insult that goes unanswered breeds anxiety in the speaker. Was he ignored out of disdain, or is retribution already moving behind the veil? The imagination of men is easily weaponized against them. Silence grants that imagination fertile ground in which to grow suspicion and fear. The prince who learns to hold his tongue causes others to speak more, to reveal themselves, and in doing so, hand him the advantage. Consider the arena of negotiation. When two sides meet, the one who speaks first often cedes ground before he realizes it. He defines the terms, exposes his concerns, and offers concessions before knowing the other's position. But the man who waits, who allows the silence to stretch, shows strength. His stillness forces the other party to fill the void, to tip their hand, to give more than they intended. In every deal, the one who controls the pace controls the outcome, and silence is the master of pace. It slows, it pressures, it constrains. In warfare, too, silence is power. The general who moves without signal, who keeps his intentions, hidden even from his closest captains, spreads unease among his enemies. Armies fear the unknown more than they fear visible strength. A silent camp at night, no drums, no firelight, no boasting songs, can unnerve an opponent more deeply than the sound of 1,000 warriors preparing. Silence in war suggests readiness, or worse, unpredictability. It makes commanders hesitate, doubt their spies, mistrust their own formations. While they plan against ghosts, the silent army prepares a decisive blow. In the court, silence undermines the confidence of those who plot. A prince who speaks little of his views, who reacts with measured stillness rather than emotion, becomes an enigma. His nobles cannot manipulate him, for they do not know what he prizes most. His advisors cannot entrap him, for they do not know what he fears. His enemies cannot predict him, for he leaves no trail of clues. They are forced to act blindly, and blind men often stumble into ruin. Silence is thus a trap laid with invisible wire. One does not even realize they have been ensnared until they can no longer move without pain. Even in the execution of justice, Silence carries a blade. The guilty man who is not confronted directly, but rather summoned with no explanation, stripped of title, with no accusation, or left to wander the court without being addressed, begins to unravel from within. He becomes his own accuser, his own judge. His allies drift away, unsure of the prince's stance. His confidence dissolves, replaced by paranoia. A wordless condemnation burns deeper than any decree, for it offers no ground for defense. The silence becomes a sentence that is never declared, yet fully enforced. A ruler must master the art of pausing, not in fear, but in control. A decision delayed in silence can fracture alliances more surely than a hasty denial. It breeds anticipation, and anticipation breeds dependency. Ministers and nobles come forth, offering their opinions, their allegiances, their secrets, in hopes of moving the silent prince to act. In this state, they reveal far more than they intend, and the ruler gains far more than he gives. He becomes the axis around which others spin, not because he moves, but because they cannot tell if or when he will. To wield silence as strategy requires discipline. Many are tempted to speak in order to soothe tensions, to affirm their presence, to counter lies. But each word is a step into the open. The ruler who disciplines his tongue keeps his power close, his thoughts concealed, and his enemies guessing. And it is in that guessing, that stumbling in the dark, that they make their fatal errors. In every court, in every assembly, and in every exchange between men, there is a currency more costly than gold, more binding than silver words. Each spoken phrase is a transaction, and the wise ruler knows that speech, though it may seem free, often comes at the highest price. Words are agreements, confessions, clues, oaths, or provocations. They set in motion chains of expectation and obligation. A prince must understand that words, once given, are like arrows loosed from the bow. They cannot be recalled, only endured. The cost of words lies in their permanence. Unlike thoughts, which can be revised, and intentions, which can be concealed, words are fixed. The spoken word enters the ears of allies and enemies alike. It is remembered, recorded, and repeated. It is twisted in taverns, reimagined in courts, and interpreted according to the needs of those who hear them. A single miscalculation in speech may spark rebellion, invite betrayal, or encourage dissent. Even when uttered in confidence, a word is a fire passed from hand to hand, eventually finding its way to one who will use it to burn the hand that gave it. The people crave speech from their rulers. They demand declarations, assurances, proclamations. They mistake verbosity for strength, clarity for vision. But the moment a ruler indulges them too often, he binds himself. To promise is to concede leverage. To clarify is to remove the possibility of maneuver. To explain is to reduce one's mystique. The ruler who believes he can speak openly and remain untouchable is already ensnared. Every word becomes a contract, and every contract a chain. An ill, timed or excessive word weakens the image of authority. The ruler must remain above the din, not part of it. If he speaks too often, his presence becomes common. The people begin to measure him, to judge his logic, to question his consistency. Familiarity is the enemy of reverence. A prince whose voice is heard too frequently becomes a man among men, not a figure above them. And once he is seen as merely a man, he must then win every debate, justify every failure, and explain every silence. The burden becomes unbearable. Words may also serve as weapons, but they are weapons that can wound both the target and the wielder. A threat, once spoken, demands fulfillment. If the ruler threatens and does not act, he is weakened. If he acts without having spoken, he is feared. A king who declares war in anger has committed to blood before the sword has left the sheath. But one who moves without warning disorients his enemies and maintains the advantage. The silent strike terrifies more than the announced siege. There is strength in letting action speak, while the tongue remains still. A ruler's word must also be sparing, because the more one speaks, the more opportunities one gives for contradiction. A wise prince may change his course according to the winds of power, but if he has spoken too freely, he leaves behind a trail of commitments that become stones tied to his feet. The past will be used against him. The very words that once secured loyalty may later be cited as betrayal. One cannot lead with freedom if one is bound by the echoes of one's own voice. There are also those who use their words not as rulers, but as merchants, trading favor, making promises, forming alliances sealed by flattery. These men are not princes but petitioners in fine clothing. They will find themselves entangled in webs of obligation spun from their own mouths. When they fail to fulfill what they promised, their name is weakened. When they attempt to please all with words, they serve none with strength. The true sovereign never speaks to be liked, he speaks only to be obeyed. Every word, therefore, must be examined before it is spoken. What effect will it have? Who will hear it? Who will repeat it? What expectation will it create? A prince must ask whether silence would achieve more. For silence is not absence, it is potential. A word is final, but silence is possibility. Silence can be feared, admired, or respected. A man who speaks commits to one path. A man who holds his tongue may choose from many. In the shaping of reputation, the value of words is greatest when they are rare. A ruler's word, when seldom used, becomes a treasure. His declarations are taken seriously because they are not thrown about like coins in a crowded market. When he speaks, the world listens, not because of the volume of his voice, but because of the silence he broke to deliver it. A ruler must also understand that others will seek his words constantly. Ministers will prod him for direction. Allies will beg for reassurance. Enemies will tempt him into misspeaking. The test of strength is not in how forcefully one speaks, but in how often one refuses to. Those who wait for the ruler to declare himself may wither in their impatience. Let them. Their desperation reveals more than their inquiry. Their curiosity can be a tool, their frustration a trap. Lastly, one must never forget that words once spoken cannot be isolated. They will breed interpretation. They will sprout implications. The court will discuss not only what was said, but what was meant, what was not said, and what it suggests. In the mouths of others, even a careful sentence may become poison. Thus, the fewer the words, the fewer the interpretations. The fewer the interpretations, the stronger the command. Power, true power, belongs not to the one who shouts, but to the one who controls when and if he speaks. In silence there is calculation, in restraint there is strategy, and in the unseen there lies the greatest force. The strong do not need to explain themselves. Their actions speak where their mouths remain shut. To rule with silence is to rule with mastery. Guiding the ambitions of others while concealing one's own, observing without revealing, striking without warning, and commanding without pleading. Those who understand the weight of words will wield them with the same care as a dagger, sharp and precise. Those who speak too freely spend their strength before the battle begins. Let others reveal themselves through their noise. The wise will build their strength in quiet and rule from the shadow that all men fear, but none can strike.